Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to set up Voicemeeter Potato in 2026. So I'm going to show you how to set up Voicemeeter from scratch, how to add effects to your voice, and also later on I'm going to show you how to set up Voicemeeter Potato for Discord and for OBS. But first guys, if you want, you can go down on this video in the comment section and click on the first comment that I pinned. This will bring you to my Fiverr, and here you can get a YouTube logo and banner or a modern minimalist YouTube logo and banner for your YouTube channel. But now back to the video. So first, if you actually don't have Voicemeeter Potato yet, I have a video up here in the right corner that will show you how to download and install Voicemeeter Potato software, but also in case you are struggling on how to download it, make sure you check out that video once again up here in the right corner. Now there's actually something important I want to do first before starting with Voicemeeter Potato here. So I'm going to start by minimalizing it right here. And so I'm going to go down to the sound icon. So I'm just going to click on it. Then I want to go to the output. So this is going to be the Windows output. And I'm just going to keep it on speakers for the moment. Now if you just downloaded and installed Voicemeeter, there's a big chance that it's actually going to be automatically selected on, for example, the cable input, if that's something you download and installed as well, or any other Voicemeeter related outputs. So make sure that if you don't hear anything from the start, make sure you select your own speakers for the moment being. So then I want to go back to the sound icon. This time I'm going to right click, sound settings. I'm going to scroll all the way down until you see more sound settings. So click on that. I'm going to close this. And it's going to be this little window. Now it's very important what you're going to select here, inputs and outputs, because whatever you're going to select, it's actually possible that you won't hear my video anymore or any other sounds. Now for that, if I put this aside for the moment, I'm just going to reopen Voicemeeter Potato here, side by side. So it isn't actually that difficult. You see, for example, 1 to 5 is going to be these 5. If you see the Voicemeeter input or VAO3 input, and then same for the aux input are just going to be these virtual inputs. And if you go to recording, and as you can see for the moment, by default I have selected my microphone. If you want that to be something else like Voicemeeter Out B1, which I could advise you, you set default and you click apply. And okay, but I actually keep it in this video at my standard microphone and speakers. I will not change anything here. In case you are going to change anything here though, and you're going to select an input and output through Windows, no matter which one you choose in that case, right click on it, you right click and do properties. Then you want to go to advanced, and so you want to make sure it's either on 2-channel 24-bit 48,000 Hz studio quality, so this one, or this one, the 2-channel 16-bit 48,000 Hz DVD quality. So either of those two, make sure you select that. Once again, then you click apply, but it's going to be for the quality. So this step is also important. Of course, do the same if you're going to choose a playback as well. You're going to do the same process. Once again, no matter which one you use, you do that. Then I also want to go to the communications tab up here. Now mine is currently set at reduce the volume of other sounds by 80%. Now what that does is that, for example, if you have an incoming call, an alarm on Windows, whatever incoming sound there will be, it will reduce the sound by 80%. Now it is actually more advised in this case, especially if you're going to use Voicemeeter, to select do nothing, because that means that the sound, so whatever you're doing in Voicemeeter, for example, is going to be the same. No matter if once again something incoming like a call or an alarm is going off in Windows, it will not do anything. It will remain the same amount of volume as what you were originally doing. So of course, if that's something you want, and I could advise you to do that in this case, is select do nothing. Once again, if you made any changes and you want to keep them, click apply and click OK. So then of course I'm in Voicemeeter Potato itself. That might seem quite overwhelming and complicated at first, but it's actually easier than it seems. So I'm going to break it down for you one by one. To start off, up here there's a newer feature. As you can see, if I go on anything with my mouse, up there, so here, will be a sentence explaining whatever that option does in question. It's a nice little addition to Voicemeeter which you didn't have in the past, so do keep that one in mind. Then pretty important, here are going to be the first 5 hardware inputs, so stereo inputs, like for example a microphone. Now this is going to be stereo input 1, but I renamed it to microphone. And so those are going to be physical inputs, also known here as the A1 to A5. And so if I go on the right side, you have the 5 physical outputs. So once again, the A1 to A5. Then here we're going to have 3 virtual inputs. So their names are Voicemeeter input, Voicemeeter aux, and the Voicemeeter VAIO3. So this is going to mostly be used for example, YouTube, Discord, OBS. And so those will correspond to the virtual outputs, also known as B1, B2 and B3. But I'll show you all of that later in practice so that you understand it better. Now if you had any settings lingering around, or you just wanted to reset your settings in general, what you can do then is actually go up right here to the menu and select reset settings, so reinitialization. Here you click yes, and all of your settings would be reset. Now I didn't have any settings to begin with, but that's in case of course you want that. Now if I go back to menu, underneath there you also have the option system tray. So if you select that option, every time you close it, it's actually going to go go down to this little arrow, and it will be together with these icons. So these will be more like running in the background. And so this is going to be the system tray. Whenever you select that option, Voicemeeter Potato is not going to entirely close. It's going to go down here as an icon. And back in menu, once again underneath that, we have run on Windows Startup. Now that of course is going to mean that Voicemeeter is going to run on Windows Startup. So whenever you're launching up your PC automatically, so that you immediately can use Voicemeeter Potato on startup. Now of course this is only in case you really want that. Once again you can just select this and there'll be a check mark, and then it will mean it's enabled. Now important, down here you go to system settings, and so this window will show up. Now no matter how many of these you're gonna use, make sure that preferably it's set to sample rate of 48,000 Hz. Now as you can see, preferred main sample rate is 48,000. If you click on it, you can actually change it. You can also go for 44,100 at times. There's gonna be some cases where it might be a bit better, but 48,000, do keep in mind, is considered like the best option, the best quality. Now 88,200 is going to be a bit too high for quality, it's going to be a bit unnecessary, and I would say that 32,000 Hz is quite low. I would mainly go between one of these, and I mainly always choose 48,000 Hz, which is something I could advise. Something else that is important if you're dealing with latency, you can choose either of these two. Now I'll tell you in a second what WDM and MME are going to be, but depending on which one you're going to choose, make sure you click on it. This message will show, basically asking, are you sure you want to change this? You're just going to click OK. Now by default it's going to be around 500 samples. Once again, if you're having some problem with latency, so that basically means when you're for example speaking a word, you're saying a sentence, and it comes out a couple of milliseconds to a second later, then it means you have some latency problems. There's kind of a delay there, if you will. Now to do that, it is generally advised to go lower in samples. So if you go around here, this is quite low. The signal might be a bit more direct and there will be less to no latency. Now there's going to be cases where this might actually also be too low, and then you'll have to go up a little bit again. So really test it out in case once again you're really running into a problem with your sound where, as I said, you speak some words and it comes out way too late. Definitely look into this and generally bring it down. Now depending which ones you are going to use, what you can do is click like 4 times and you can set it to stereo repeat, which is something I could definitely advise you to do. So if I for example use the A1 and the B1, I'm going to set both to stereo repeat, maybe also B2, why not? That basically means it's going to have that stereo quality, which is definitely advised and it's a good quality. Then going up here, first, as I said earlier, I did rename this whole channel to microphone because that's where I generally put my microphone. Now to change that, you can just right click on it and name it whatever you want, then you click enter. It's of course optional. Then to add the input, we're gonna click here. Make sure most of the cases it's gonna be WDM. Sometimes you might run into a problem and you have to go for MME rather. So you can alternate between the two, but generally speaking, make sure it's gonna be WDM and select your microphone. Now in my case, I have a Blue Yeti microphone. So this is the one that I'm gonna select. Okay, and so there you go. As you can see, now you can hear my microphone without any effects on it. Like it just comes raw out of the box. And so we do also have a signal here. So now for the output, you wanna make your way up to A1. Now in this case, I rather advise you to go for MME, but once again, if you're running into any problems, you can always alternate with WDM as well. Though generally, make sure this is MME for the output. And I've selected in my case the cable input. But what you can also do, for example, is select your speakers. This is in case you want to hear yourself. Just select the output that you want. Now you might have noticed that there are A2 and then up to A5, which is nice about Voicemeeter Potato. There's going to be a lot of options to add multiple outputs. So if you go to A2 and I had, for example, my screen, I can add, or a second pair of headphones. If you're, for example, with a friend who also has a pair of headphones and you both connect to the PC, and then you can also both route them here in Voicemeeter Potato. So it will be selected in the outputs and you select the pair of headphones in question. And in that case, you'll both be able to hear the same sound. So do keep this option in mind. It could actually be very interesting to you, the fact that you can add multiple outputs. Now, if you want to hear yourself speak in Voicemeeter Potato, go up to the outputs and select your speakers. Now, in this case, those speakers actually correspond to my headphones, so I will hear it in my headphones, but I'll be able to hear my own voice speaking. Now, if you have an actual pair of speakers that you want to hear it through that are on your desk, for example, select those. But I know for me, it's this one. And whenever you select something like that, you'll be able to hear your own voice, if that's something you want, of course. Now, if you want to stop hearing yourself, so here in output, you have probably selected your speakers so that you can hear yourself speak. You can either, of course, change the source here and go for something else like the cable input, or if I close this, you can unselect A1 like this. Now if you unselect A1, you will not be able to hear your own voice anymore. You do although generally want to make sure that B is on, since that's the audio that other people will hear. So if you uncheck B, then other people will not be able to hear you anymore. So do keep that in mind as well. This is actually very important. A is going to be the sound that you will hear in Voicemeeter, and B will be the sound what other people will hear. It's a very important distinction that you have to keep in mind while using Voicemeeter. And I wanted to show you how to add effects to your voice in Voicemeeter Potato. To do that, I'm going to remain in the same channel here where I added my microphone. And I'm simply going to move this here. Now, as you can see, if I bring this towards the low ends, you will hear that there's going to be quite a lot of low end, especially if I go more towards this part. It's going to be a bit too low. A bit more towards here, it's not bad. Now, if I put it into the highs, you're going to hear that the voice gets pretty thin. Once again, you can find like a balance between the two, but it quickly gets quite thin. And then here above, you can have some kind of an echo sound. Now, of course, it's going to be for some more specific cases that you want that. And if you then double click, as you can see, it will just reset it. So that is definitely one way to make your voice better. What you can do then as well is right click, add some modulation. I'm not going to do this too much, just going to add a little bit. As you can see, it adds this very, of course, modulated sound to your voice. The more you go up, the brighter and the larger the sound is going to be. Then you can once again right click, and we have the panning. So the panning is going to be in case, of course, you want to hear it in your left ear. And if I do this, I'm going to go to your right ear, and you'll hear the panning in your right ear. Of course, you generally want to keep this in the middle, in the center. You can also do this in a 3D graph to make the sound also a bit larger, and then we can right click again to go back to the start. Then there's going to be some other interesting options. Now, compression, first of all, if you're just going to use it like this, make sure it's not more than 2. But what's nice about Voicemeeter Potato is we are able to have a more detailed overview of these effects in this case. And how you do that is right click on it, and as you can see here we have the compression details. Now, compression is quite subtle. What you just generally want to keep in mind with this is that the ratio, you can bring this up, but don't bring it up too much. I would say at most a ratio of 4, so like 3.5 or 4. Of course, this also depends on your recording environment, because it's going to bring out the sounds in the background as well. The threshold, this really depends. I think it's generally more like -18, and then you can bring up the input gain as well. You basically have to start to talk quiet, and then you're gonna gradually just bring this up to a point where you like the volume. Now, the attack time, you want this to be quite low, generally speaking, so that it reacts faster to the compression. Release time generally would be like between 50 and 100, I would say. And if by the end it is too quiet, you also have the output gain to compromise with the sound if it got quieter by doing the threshold. Because this, of course, is gonna basically mean that if you're whispering, talking very quietly while recording, basically the compression is gonna make that a bit louder. You can just double click to reset. Now, right clicking again in this case is really necessary because the gate is already immediately underneath the compression. In this case, the threshold, I would say like -40 to 45, pretty good. Underneath there, your voice is going to cut off too much. I'll actually show you an example up here. If I'm going to put this up quite a lot, you will see that when I start speaking, it's going to cut off my voice at some point. It's going to maybe cut off or my voice at times. So basically that's definitely something you want to avoid if it cuts off your voice too much. Sometimes it's even the first word of a sentence people will not understand, or it will be barely recorded, the first word or last word of a sentence. That's why you don't want to exaggerate this. And in this case, as I said, between -40 and 45. Not lower than -40, because then it will start cutting off as well. And once again, that's definitely something we don't want. Now, to also help with this, you can, for example, you know, start typing on your keyboard or talking at the same time. And you keep on just using this right here. Find the right level that you actually like. Damping, I would say, like, you can bring that all the way down to -15 to -18 maybe. Now, for the attack time, put it quite low, because it will mean that it doesn't cut off your voice as well while you speak. So the lower you put this, you'll be able to say a word. After a moment of silence, the more direct the words will come in. You can, although, put this a bit up if you start noticing that some background noise will get picked up the moment you start saying a sentence. So if you think that this is too low, then you can always put this up a bit higher, but I really won't put the attack time very high in this case. Now, the hold time, I would say a bit more up, between like 500 and 1000. Seems excessive, but you really want to be, I would say, generally between 500 and 1000, around there. And release time in this case, also not too low actually. You really have to adapt that to the settings you just did up here. And I mean, don't go too low with this. I would say you can bring this up a bit. Right click to bring it back. Denoiser is also going to be a form of noise removal, a bit different than the gate. Now, if you put this up too much, your voice will actually get quite muffled, you know, and reduce basically the quality of your voice. We can also right click for the denoiser, and the settings here are going to be, of course, the amount of noise removal, what we just saw basically. But underneath there we have something different, the voice modular. And with this you are able to pitch up or down your voice. So if you're going to put it here, it's going to pitch it up and pitch it down, basically making it lower sounding or like higher sounding, your voice. This is going to be the amount, how much it is going to affect it. What you also have underneath that is going to be the presets. So you have different presets you can select where there will already be prepared settings. Then you can just also, of course, play around with these on yourself. It's really just going to drastically change and pitch your voice up or down once again. Could be interesting. Also, don't forget to put this on if you're going to do this by yourself. So just select this on. This is of course going to be for some more specific cases. Do know that that option is also here in Voicemeeter Potato. Other option that is going to be unique to Voicemeeter Potato, and that's actually the option to add reverb and delay. Now what it is, reverb is going to make the sound a bit larger. Put this up. Now these, by the way, will be directly connected, if you go all the way to the right, to these special effects up here. And then of course for the reverb you click on if you want to actually add that, and you can put up the value as well. You can also click post, so it's going to be post effect, so after the effects. Now I put it quite low here, but what you can also do if you go to reverb, you can right click on the word reverb, then this little window will show up. And so here we have different, once again, might seem a bit complicated, but simply said, this is going to make it sound like a room, for example, a hall. So you have like this larger sound, also like a stadium. So you can select if you want like a short, medium or larger sound. This is how dry it's going to be and how wet it's going to be. Same if you also want some delay with it. And down here we can just make it, and down here you basically have an EQ, which is something I'll talk about more in detail later in this video. But basically you can, for example, add some more lows, mere mids or high frequencies, make the sound a bit clearer or a bit more bass in there. And then for the delay, you can also bring this up. Basically delay will mean that there's gonna hear yourself a bit double maybe. Once again, I'll keep this low just for the sake of this video. I'm not gonna exaggerate it either. Then of course click on delay and also right click. Also make sure you select either A or B to correspond to these. And don't worry, once again, don't be overwhelmed by this option. This is gonna be basically your left and right ear, so depending. This is how much delay you want, how loud it is gonna be. Once again, how wet or how dry. Basically how much of the delay you want as well. And the tempo isn't really too complicated, so then we can just click on it and it'll be off once again. Of course, do keep in mind you have those options. It's interesting because that's something you actually don't have in the previous Voicemeters. Of course, being in Voicemeeter Potato, which has the most options. Now the external effects, also don't forget these. You can also click post, of course, to do it after effects, and that will correspond to the external effects return. So if you put this up, you'll be able to hear, of course, if you're doing A1, because we have A1 here. If you go, for example, B1 so that you guys hear it, it will be B1, and then you can put up the values here as well. So also keep that in mind. That will be directly sent to these. Okay, then of course we have the volume, so this is going to affect the volume, it's going to make it a bit louder. Now of course quickly we'll get in the red here, so it means it gets too loud. You can also of course make it more quiet. As you can see, you'll probably barely hear me over there. That is of course only going to affect this channel in which I have my microphone currently. Now here you have a limiter, sometimes you can drag it down, but most of the time just right click and select a value. So if I do 3, it's going to limit the sound at 3 dB. So it will not ever get past, in this case, the limit that I set it to, so 3 dB, whenever you're recording something. So that's nice if you want to also limit the sound in Voicemeeter Potato, something that some of you might want, where you want it to peak at, and then you can click enter or escape if you want to remove it. And so if you don't want it anymore, you can just drag it up or change it to a higher value. We can also put this specific microphone channel to mono. Now if I click on this, for me it's just going to make it a bit louder, but in case you only hear your microphone in one ear, then I would definitely advise you to select mono. Normally the sound would actually be in both of your ears in that case. If you select mono, you should be able to hear your sound again in 2 ears. Keep that one in mind as well, otherwise it isn't very necessary. Then solo. Now if I click on it, you might already notice it's going to mute the other channels, so it's only going to make sure that this channel is soloed out. So that's in case you really only want to focus on one specific one and basically not mess with the rest. And to finish off, of course, it's going to be mute, which speaks for itself. So if I'm going to click mute, you're going to stop hearing. We'll make sure that neither you or anybody else will be able to hear you or any other sound. So of course there's also something you can do on the other channels where you mute a certain sound for a moment because you don't want other people or yourself to hear it. So whenever you are actually done here and you've made all kinds of changes that you wanted, what you can do is actually specifically go to the word Intellipan, you right click and you have some options. So we can reset anything here, copy the settings, but also save it. So we can save maybe only the compressor or only the noise gate. But you can also save the entire tab. So anything here in this channel, we can save it together. The next time we use it, you can also right click on it again and do load. And we're going to load certain settings. So once again, if you only did, for example, compressor, but also if you saved everything within here, you can also just load it once again and immediately have those settings. It's quite hidden, so you have to know about it. So do definitely keep that one in mind as well. But anyways, I got my normal voice effects back. So then I wanted to talk about VB virtual audio cable in Voicemeeter Potato. Now in case you don't have the virtual audio cable yet, I actually have a video up here that shows you how to download and install the virtual audio cable so that you will actually be able to use it in Voicemeeter as well. So if you want to know all of the steps on how to get it, make sure you check out that video so that you can put that virtual cable that we just downloaded, for example, in stereo input 2. Now if I click, once again, make sure it's either a WDM or MME if you're running into any problems. But once again, generally speaking, you definitely want this to be a WDM, and you select cable output. Now this is going to be an input, but it's called output. It sounds a bit confusing maybe, but it is an input. Now this is in case you want people to hear your audio that you are currently hearing, and you can actually route that through here. So any music, anything on YouTube for example, the sound can go through there. Now in case whatever software you're using, also make sure that, like for example Discord, do make sure in that case, and you want to make somebody else listen to it, of course make sure that in Discord you also select the cable output in your sound settings. Once again in the software as well, you select cable output. So it will be connected to it, and so that the sound can go, once again in this case, through the cable output. And so in a sense, use this virtual cable as a virtual microphone where you can put your sound through. That's how you can see it as well. So now I'm going to show you how to use the virtual inputs in Voicemeeter Potato. So first just removed this whole microphone channel here because I didn't need it anyway. Now how I did that is actually click on it and I did remove selection. So it actually reset everything here. Now if I go down back to the Windows output sound, so I'm just going to click here. There we go to the output. Now in this case it actually selects the output device as the Voicemeeter input. So that means it will directly be connected to this one right here specifically. If I had done the Voicemeeter VIO free input, it would have been this one. If I go down and I selected Voicemeeter aux input, it would have been this one. So that's why these correspond to these right here. But as I said, I'm just going to keep it at the Voicemeeter input, so the first one. So in your case, if you're going to do this as well, make sure that you also select the right output in Windows, very important. And also in Voicemeeter itself, if I go to A1, once again, most of the time, probably make sure it's an MME. I actually went for my speakers, so I can also directly hear what I'm doing. So that's also why I selected it to speakers, so I can actually hear through Voicemeeter Potato the actual effects in the virtual inputs. That's also quite important to mention. Okay, so then I'm going to search for an example video of music so that you can hear what the virtual inputs can do. Okay, there you go. So I found this example. It's from the channel Obsidian Sound Fields. And so if I go back to Voicemeeter Potato, you can also see that it automatically already added Google Chrome within, as I said, so the Voicemeeter input. So the one we selected. Now if I start playing the sound, for example, so as you can see, it's already picking up a signal as well. Okay, so then we can of course do the volume as well. Now then here in the equalizer, we have the treble. It's going to be the highs. If you can hear, it's going to make it pretty bright. The mids. It's definitely going to bring up the middle part in the sound, which you don't necessarily want. You can bring this down. And of course the bass. As you can hear, it's of course exaggerated, it's put to the max. You can hear a lot of bass. If you bring this down, see now it's gonna have no bass at all. So you can find some really nice settings if you're gonna play around with these a bit and find quite a nice sound. And then we can just double click to reset these as well. It's of course a nice option you can keep in mind. Okay, so there you go, I re-audited my microphone in Voicemeeter Potato. If I click here, you can see I just did WDM again and my microphone, and there are currently no other effects on my voice. So I'm actually going to show you how to add EQ in Voicemeeter Potato. Now if you want to hear yourself during the process of changing the EQ, make sure that you go to A1. Most of the time make sure it's an MME or WDM at times, and select your speakers so that you can actually hear yourself talk. And so while you're making the changes in the EQ, you'll be able to hear yourself and the changes you're making to your voice. Now there are going to be multiple ways we can access the EQ. So what we can do, because it's in A1, I can also go to the output, so the physical output A1, and go to the EQ. Now do make sure that you select it so it becomes blue. And when it becomes blue, it just means it's enabled. And then you right click, and as you can see, you can add the EQ right here. Now if I close this, so you just click on it again, so it's grayed out, which means it's disabled. In Voicemeeter Potato, you actually have the option to do it in the channel itself. So once again, here where I connected my microphone, I can just do the EQ here. All I have to do is click. Once again, make sure that this time it looks like this. So this is enabled, and this is disabled when it's grayed out. So we have to make sure it looks like this. And then you can right click again, and we also have an EQ chart. And make sure if you don't hear any changes, sometimes you can alternate between A and B. And so this also makes sure that of course you have a microphone selected right now, like I have. So now the EQ, if you don't know a lot about an equalizer, I'll basically try to explain it to you simply. First off, here is going to be the lows, so up until like 200 kilohertz I would say, so that's about here. You can also see down here, that's like 200. So like everything here is going to be like low end, so the bass, everything that's like low. Then here I'm not going to really use this either, but it basically makes your sound muffled and boxed, which is definitely something you want to avoid. And then around, I would say 800, 900 up until like 2000, we're going to have the mid frequencies in the middle. And then up here, when it starts to go up until like 4K especially and 6K, this is definitely going to be the high end. And at the end is going to be the openness, how open it is going to sound basically. Now to start off, I want to start with like the bass, so the low end. Now generally speaking, especially if you're working with anything that is like a voice, underneath 100, not to be interesting. Sometimes you can even cut it like so, or entirely cut it, but I don't think it's going to be really necessary in this case. It's basically to remove some bad low end, because that is what this is. This is like boominess, rumbling, bad low end. For the bass, I'll actually mainly focus on this part. So I'll try to put it like somewhere in the middle. So as you can see up here, when I'm turning on the knobs, I'm going to be like, yeah, what's going to be the middle? Like 150, I would say. I'm just going to bring that up. So this is going to call boosting. So right now I'm boosting a frequency. You might hear it. My voice gets more bass in it. And now I'm actually cutting a frequency. So now there will be less bass. So keep in mind, this is cutting and this is boosting a frequency or frequencies. So I do want to put some bass in there. I do like some bass in my voice. Really not too much either, but... And then this is going to be how narrow it's going to be, which in this case, I don't really need to. I want it to be a bit larger, not too large either. Because of course you also don't take some bad frequencies here, as I said, in the low end here, the bad low end. So we don't want to take too much with it. But then here, as you can see, I can bring it up like towards here. Now if I exaggerate this, you're probably going to hear that's very boominess. My voice right now is very low. Of course, if I exaggerate it there, maybe around here. Now, as I said, if we're gonna go towards the 200 and 400s, the sound's gonna be quite muffled. It's really not interesting. No matter if you boost it or you're gonna cut it, it's gonna sound quite muddy, muffled sound. Same 400 to like 800 when you get up there. It's also like a boxed sound. Once again, no matter if you boost it or you cut it, it's gonna sound quite boxed. That's also something you want to avoid. So that's why we're gonna start approximately around 900 to like 1000. Once again, I kind of want to grab it in the middle. So this time I will go towards like, I would say 1500. Now in this case, when I boost it, as you can see, I don't really like how this sounds. It gets quite thin. So we actually want to remove some, maybe around there. There we go. Make this somewhat narrow. Same is going to be a bit large. Once again, without taking the bad frequencies. Now there are some interesting frequencies here as well, but I'm just going to go ahead and skip to like 4000. Doesn't have to be exact, but around there is definitely a good frequency. I'm going to start boosting it. Now in this case, I definitely want it to be more narrow, because as you can hear, you can easily like boost some sibilants, some like kind of sounds, and you definitely want to avoid that. Bring this up quite a lot. So then here I want to go over to 6K just next to that, which is definitely another good frequency for the high end. Once again, make this quite narrow. Now the problem with this frequency is that it's gonna be too much sibilance too quick. So as I said, like this kind of sounds around the 6K, it's pretty prominent. It jumps out a lot. So that's why when you're gonna boost, so add some 6000 kilohertz here, you don't want to do it too much, because you're quickly gonna have these very annoying high frequency sounds piercing throughout your audio. It's gonna be definitely a bit calmer than the 4K, I would say. So yeah, really look what you prefer, but once again, these will help with the clarity mainly. Now lastly, I'll actually keep this on 12,000. It's gonna be the openness, and I will select this one. Now if I start doing this, as you can see, it's gonna make it more open, and that is exactly what we want. Now actually not even gonna change that much here, to be honest. Once again, also don't exaggerate this, otherwise it's gonna make out everything jump out too much. You know, you're gonna hear too much of the bass, too much of the highs. So even though this helps with openness, don't really go overboard with this. Okay, there you go, and I think I'll keep it at that. Now of course this isn't perfect, this is an example. Of course every microphone and especially every voice is different, so adapt this to your voice as well. That is very important to keep in mind. Now don't worry, when you actually close this, you still have the effects on your voice. It's only when you, for example, deselect this, so disable this. If I click, for example, right now, right here, as you can see, it will be grayed out and the effects that we just added will be gone. But then if I click on this again, as you can see, the effects will be back. And so I can just right click again to go here in case you want to make some changes, of course, as well. So I also wanted to talk about tape recorder that is integrated in Voicemeeter Potato. You of course have all of the options you would expect. So we have the rewind backwards and fast forward, play, pause of course as well, stop, and the record button. And so when you click this, it will become red. And if you click again, it will be saved. And so it will record everything that is selected here. So in this case, that will be A1 to A5 and B1 to B3. So it will record everything within Voicemeeter Potato right now. And so when you're actually done recording, you can click here. And so to bring you to a folder, now that can be one that you created yourself, like I did in Documents. I just call it Voicemeeter. But sometimes it can also send you to an already existing Voicemeeter folder, for example, going to be in your C disk. Now as you can see, I already had saved one in the past, so if I would click on this, I could actually open it, so load it and play it back. Now if I right click within here, you can have some other options. So simply set the pre-fader inputs. It's going to be the raw sound of your microphone, for example, so before anything is applied. And if you then go over here and select the post-fader outputs, that is going to be everything. So after like you added any effects and the Intellipan, the EQ, things like that. So this is going to be with the effects added. Very important to keep in mind. Then here, directories, as I said, I made my own document, but you can also choose, so you can create also your own if you want that, or do it in a pre-existing Voicemeeter folder. Sample rate, I do advise to put it at 48,000 Hertz. Sometimes you can put it down to 44,100 if you see like you're running into any problems. This I would say is too low, and definitely 88,200 and above is going to be too high. So definitely, once again, keep it at 48,000 Hertz, or maybe 44,100 at times. 16-bit, you can go up to 24-bit here. It's going to be a bit of a better quality. That's really up to you. And so you have the amount of channels and the gain. So there's going to be some extra options here. But then I can go ahead and close this. And so after you've done all that and you finish recording, what you can do as well is go to menu up here and select eject cassette, so release audio file. Just with like an analog tape recorder, this is going to eject the cassette and you'll be all done. So do make sure that at the end, whenever you're done, click on this. Okay, so then I wanted to show you how to set up Voicemeeter Potato for OBS. Now when I'm here in OBS itself, I'll first go to the settings, I go to output, and then go to the little audio tab. Now here, no matter how many tracks you use, I do advise you to set it at 320. It's going to be the highest quality. Now you can also set it to like 160 if you want to be it a bit lower, but I've never had a problem setting this at 320. So then I'm going to go to the actual audio tab. Here up here, I just want to make sure that the sample rate is going to be most of the time, once again, on 48,000 kilohertz, sometimes 44,100. And the channels, I definitely advise you to set it on stereo. But of course, most importantly, it's going to be the input and output. Now I have done my default, so my speakers is going to be my headphones and my microphone. But of course, if you're going to use Voicemeeter, make sure that first of all, in the input here, so for the microphone, you most of the time just select the out B1. That's really the one you select most of the time. So of course, then in Voicemeeter Potato itself, make sure that B1 is selected. So if it's B2 or B3, make sure that in that case you do B2 or B3. In my case, it's just going to be B1. One other option you could do, of course, as well is to select the cable output. You have to make sure that you select to one of these channels here, the cable output. Then you can select that here as well. So that's going to be the virtual cable. Then for the output, so the desktop audio, you could do the Voicemeeter input if you want it to be this one. The Voicemeeter aux input if you want it to be this one. And so, of course, the Voicemeeter VA-IO3 if you want it to be this one. So those are going to be in case you want the virtual inputs. And of course, otherwise, you can also just go ahead and select the cable input as an option. Then once you're done here, make sure you click apply and then you click OK. And so now I want to show you how to set up Voicemeeter Potato for Discord. Okay, so once we're in Discord here, you want to go down to the settings, then go down to voice and video. Now sometimes you can leave this on default, but it isn't really recommended. So I'm just going to go ahead and change the input, so the microphone. Now once again, I definitely advise you to just use the out B1. That is also where it is going to be connected to by default. So as you can see here in Voicemeeter Potato, so B1 is selected. Now if you did B2 or B3, then of course select this B2 or B3 here, depending on which one you use. By default, and most of the time, just use out B1. Or the cable output is also an option. In that case, you have to link the cable output here. Then you'll be able to use that as well. So then for the output, so the speakers, you can select the Voicemeeter input. That's going to be the first one here. The Voicemeter aux input is going to be the second virtual input. And the VA-IO3, which is going to be the third and last virtual input here that we have. And of course, once again, also have the option to, for example, link it to your cable input. So your virtual cable. So then lastly, but of course also very important, I wanted to show you how to save the settings here in Voicemeeter Potato. So I'm going to go up here to menu and you want to select save settings. Now it is going to be an XML file, as you can see. You can name this whatever you want and it's going to be a .xml. Now wherever you want it to be saved is up to you. You can also, for example, go to documents and create your own folder and save it there. Or as you can see, there's like a already prepared path here where Voicemeeter itself is installed as well. And there it created a folder with my settings in it. So that's entirely up to you as long as you know where to find it back and where you save it. That's the most important part. And so then when you choose your name, you can click save. And then in the future, if you, for example, want to load these settings, you go back to menu and click on load settings. Once again, it will bring you in any folder where you might have saved the settings in the past. Then you just click on it here, you double click or you do open, and then you have these exact same settings and they will load here in Voicemeeter Potato. And finally, underneath that, you also have the load settings on startup. In my experience in the past, it has always loaded up on startup for me whenever I was launching Voicemeeter. But in case, you can always check this to make sure. Okay, so there we go, guys. Definitely quite a lengthy video. I really tried to cover the most important things in Voicemeeter Potato. So it's also like a Voicemeeter Potato beginner's tutorial. If you have any questions, do leave them down below. And in any case, I do hope you enjoyed this video. And please leave a like, it would be really nice. Subscribe, it would also be really nice. I hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye.